Hello and welcome to the Crowbar Dev System Setup. We're going to walk through this Dev System configuration page and it takes us through the Docker admin setup. So the assumption here is that you're using a Windows desktop using VirtualBox, and you're going to run an Ubuntu VM as your dev environment. You're going to do editing from Windows onto that dev VM. You're going to do all your Git management out of that virtual machine, and then you're going to run a Docker admin node. So you're going to run Crowbar fully installed out of a Docker container on that VM. I know that's a little bit Inception-like. It's a very efficient way for us to do development. Crowbar is really focused on running Linux operating systems, so the Windows environment really just serves as a host for us. But since that's what most people in corporate world seem to be using, then we use that. If you want to do all this stuff and you just have a Linux machine or a Mac is going to be a lot like the Windows system, but the Linux desktop, just rock on. You can do this stuff without the extra Inception. You can still use Docker and things like that. But we're going to walk you through these steps. We are in the OpenCrowbar core doc development guides, dev systems readme file. This is really the file that you jump to if you follow our pointer to fast start. And so a lot of this we've been trying to streamline. There is a tutorial that we're going to assume that you need to work through. This is the VirtualBox system. This is VirtualBox, and you can see I've got a whole bunch of machines. I've built this this VM here. So let me show you some of my VirtualBox configuration. So the first thing you'll do is you'll notice I've installed my extensions, and I have a NAT. It comes with a NAT network, so I'm not using that. And I have a host-only Ethernet adapter. This first one, I'm using the 222 network. Crowbar doesn't use any of those by default, so that's a really handy one to use. And no DHCP server. Crowbar has a DHCP server. It doesn't actually matter on this one, but I would turn off all DHCP servers. And then I have a second host-only network on my 124 address. This is the one that Crowbar is going to set up for us to use. So I'm going to use 124.1, and I'm going to disable the server. No DHCP servers. So this adapter is going to become the Crowbar network adapter. This one is needed so that I can access my VM from my desktop. And that's pretty much it from the VirtualBox settings. And then the machine itself, I followed the wizard, and then even if you follow the wizard, you're going to need to come back and test some of this stuff. But this is my third generation of build box. This is the third one I've built. You want at least 4 gigs of RAM. On my system's only got 16 gigs of RAM, so 4 is actually a good number. That lets me boot other machines. I usually have 2 parallel dev environments working. And then you want, for this machine, I don't need network boots. For the slaves, I will. And then I do want a hard disk. I don't actually, I'll care about the DVD because I need to do a full Ubuntu install. And I want at least 2 processors. If you have a multi-core machine, the more you give it, the better. Especially for the admin node, because remember, we're going to be running Docker containers there. And then I'm also worried about the display. Storage. I've already installed my base operating system on this, so I can skip that step, but normally you'd attach your Ubuntu 12.04 disk. You'd have a nice I have an 80 gig virtual disk, and you notice I'm not using that much yet, but I recommend 80, at least 40. 80 is good. Don't need audio. Networking is where it gets interesting, and what we've documented here. I have my first adapter. ETH0 is going to be NATed. And I can pretty much stick to these defaults, except I do want the cable connected. It's very important. Then I have a host only. I use my first host only adapter. Once again, connecting the cable. I usually like to turn on promiscuous mode. And then my next one here, I need to connect the cable, allow promiscuous mode, and all that looks good. So I can say OK. I'm going to come back and see what it didn't like about that setting. So it's telling me the execution cap is set to a low value, and the machine will feel slow to respond. So I can come back here. Yeah, definitely don't want that. Good. That was good advice for me to follow for that. And then for the rest here is I don't need serial ports. I actually don't need USB. Turn that off. And I don't use any machine folders. So let's see what this is telling me. Yeah, all right. I'll go ahead and turn it on, otherwise it'll bug me. So all that's good. I can boot this machine. I should tell you, this machine's already been installed with Ubuntu on it. So this is where, if you would just run a normal install, this is where you would end up. So it took the defaults, followed this documentation. This machine was actually built following all that, and it's going to just come up and boot. And I will walk you through. There's a couple of places where this gets tricky. See if I got logged in correctly. I might have been impatient. First log in. Yay, so I'm logged in. At this point, I've pretty much followed these instructions, except for this final one to set up my interface. So let's do that. So if I look at my interfaces here, you'll see I have an ETH0, and that is set up to be on my internal NAT interface, and I should be able to get, whoops, oh, my name servers aren't set up correctly. I'll fix that too. On my network, I seem to always have trouble getting these things to stay right. I've been working to resolve that. Alright, so I've set my name server. Should be able to get Google. Yay, I'm connected to the internet, to this VM. And then I want to change my network interfaces. So sorry, I need to VI it. And then for this guy, I'm just going to let ETH0 be ETH0. I want to have my ETH1 be statically defined. Let's see, I'm on number 6 as I allocate addresses, and my netmask, I do not want this to have a gateway. And then I want to restart my networking. Yay, that should all be good. Yay. And let's see, oops, make sure I set that. Shouldn't be off, should be auto. There we go. Okay. Can't have typos in that file. So now I should have my address happily set, and I should be able to ping 222.1. That's my gateway. That's very good. And from my Windows command line, I should be able to go the other direction. So this is Windows. And so the machines can talk to each other. Yay, that's very good. And now I want to apt-get install SSH server. And I've already set it up on this machine. So I'm actually in very good shape with this system. And one of the things I like to do here is copy. So while this machine is down, so at this point we've completed all the steps in here. I should be able to SSH into it because I have my machine set up. I'll show you how to do that next. But I'm going to complete my snapshot. So he's off, powering him off, good. Go back to VirtualBox, take this guy, and for a snapshot. Okay, So now if I need to, I can jump back up to that. And that completes these instructions here. Now we get back into this side. We've got some exciting setups to do for password is sudo, but instead of going through the system in this window, which I find to be pretty awkward to use, I'm going to do it here. Let's see if I have a build. I'm going to start from this. Here's one of my other ones, so I can log in here, go through to. I like to have different backgrounds, so I save systems with different backgrounds. And if I've done everything right, should be able to SSH in. My key is not set up. With this, I'll install my key in just a minute. And now we're back over here. First thing I want to do is generate a key. Take the defaults here. We're good. So now I've got a private key on this. You need this because some of the stuff that Crowbar does SSHs from the VM here into the Docker admin. That's how we actually run some of the commands and things like that. So it's important to do that. And then I want to create passwordless sudo, which is really handy. So I don't have to get prompted for my password. And one of my favorite things to do is to set up Samba. So we're going to install Samba. Samba is really highly recommended. We're already set up here because then I can attach to a file share, which I'll show you how to do. So in the Samba directory, smb-conf, I just need to come in. We've actually already did some of this. Let's see. So I just need this file section. Trying to make things easy. It's tricky sometimes. Here's our set. So if you, like me, you use my user is Crowbar. It's my home directory Crowbar, and then most of these settings are okay. It gives me just sort of general universal access. I also have to be a sudo to edit this file. So Shift G to get to the end, insert, paste. Everything's happy because I use Crowbar as my username, and then I need to do a sudo service smb daemon restart. Cool. And from that point, let's see. Here's my temp directory with all sorts of interesting stuff in it. And I can go to 192.168.222.6. And there is my directory. Very handy to do that. A lot of times I'll mount this as a drive letter also. So like v:, that machine's down. But normally that's my dev VM. Let's get a timeout. Waiting for me to refine that. All right, so I've got Samba set up. I don't need CNTLM, so I'm going to skip that. Go back to my instructions. Squid proxy. This is the place where a lot of people stumble in doing these installs. I know it certainly takes me a bit of time to get all this stuff right, which is probably the #1 thing I wanted to work on in this video. Yeah. You're not going to find it. So here, the easy part is to actually install Squid. Yay. Sorry. Yeah. This happens to me when my resolve conf file's messed up. What? always a safe fallback to run an apt-get update. I'm going to pause while this work completes. Okay, so we've done an apt-get update, so now I should be able to install Squid. Hurrah! Sometimes that's what it takes, and actually the instructions tell me to do that. I shortcutted that step. So we've got the Squid proxy coming up, and it's going to do its thing. Got a second window so I can do some steps in parallel, and one of the steps I want to do is I'm going to edit my bash file. And at the bottom of that file I'm going to add, so I want to export the HTTP proxy, and I'm going to set it to be my Squid proxy, so I'm anticipating a little bit. We've been using the port 8123. And I also want to set the HTTPS proxy to also go through Squid. So if you can't see it, I'm just making it 127.0.0.1. So move back. So this will get mapped when we do the ultimate work through the Docker container. So and then Crowbar sets up a Squid proxy also. Significantly improves performance, since our expected pattern here is that we're going to be using that Docker admin node to come up and down quite a number of times. So having it set like that really helps things quite a bit. Whoops. So that's a very nice thing to have. We've got our Squid proxy baseline in place. And sorry, that wasn't even the right server where I made that change. But what I do want to do is I'm going to set up my proxies here. So now I've got my proxy set up. I'm going to do the same thing in this window. Very handy to have these set up before we do the Squid. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate if I wget Google, it will fail because Squid proxy is not running on this port yet. So let's do a little magic. So our Squid tells us to do a little bit of editing. There's an example file over here where you can see some of the settings. This is out of date. I'm going to fix that right now. So I corrected this so that it's more accurate. What I want to do is I want to do sudo edit the Squid configuration. You may want to make a backup if you want. Localnet. So I'm going to find localnet in here. There's some examples here. So I want this localnet 172.16. That will give me the Docker net, and this is going to give me the net that I've been using for my local machine. So I need both of those turned on. And then, according to my example, I also want to make sure that I allow localnet. I don't actually need the destination. Actually, I do want the destination, so we're going to turn on the destination here. That's localhost. So we also are going to add some routing capabilities so that we can go from this domain also. So that's going to do our 2, and then I'm going to allow, should already have allow access. Let's see. It can take a while to understand exactly what's going on with Squid. So what I want to do, go back to localnet. I'm going to do the same thing here. So HTTP access, sorry, it's up right here. So I can allow that. So a lot of these files are already set up to do default. You just have to turn them on. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to allow the proxy to connect both from my local machine, but also from the Docker container. And then this one I need to search. Let me see. It's nice if you turn on the ones that are already there. So I'm just searching for always direct. Let's see. No, it's in this section. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it near my always allow. So here's my local net. So it's very important these statements come before the deny all. So this is going to give me here. So I've now built through this file. I'm going to change the HTTP port. And it's going to use 3128. We reserve that for CNTLM, so I'm using 8123, which is what most of our instructions say to use. So now I've done the basics of changing that file. I'm back to here. I have to restart the service. And if I've done this correctly, good, when I get Google, it goes through the proxy. You actually see it's telling me it's going through the connection and it should be good. So now I've actually got a proxied connection outbound. Which is very helpful for speed performance, and I've basically completed these steps. I also want to do this. Set the cache directory, and then I'm going to allow it to own the cache. That should work by default, but we're going to. Sometimes we run into issues with that, which is why we have those things in there. And sorry, restart the service again, just to make sure I haven't goofed anything up. One thing that's nice, if you're doing this on a regular Linux box and you follow these steps, you can then use that Linux box as your proxy, and that will also improve your performance. Oops, there's some edits. So at this point we've gone all the way through here. This is already set. If you look, I've already exported this. Oh, no, I didn't. Export the local proxy and change our bash RC to include that line. Good. All right, which is what it suggested. And then I'm going to add git and tmux, which are two prerequisites for using the DevTools. All right, that won't take very long. So this is the base. So at this point, I've created a sort of base working machine. Most everything else is going to get wrapped in the Docker containers. So at this point, if you want to snapshot this machine to keep it around as a base, very smart thing to do. Now we start getting serious about actually adding some more files. I'm going to start parallel tasking a little bit here. So while I'm doing that install, I can actually do the this window. Let me change the color on that just to help. Let's see. So the window appearance, we're going to change, I guess, the font color. Oops, no, that's the font. The color. Let's see. Default background, let's just modify this ever so slightly. Going to add a little bit more red, I think. Very dark red. There we go. All right. Hopefully that'll still be readable. So this is doing its installs. What I want to do is grab some files. So I'm going to make a cache directory. So this line basically sets up a cache for OpenCrowbar. To speed things along, we actually cache quite a bit of stuff, and that makes things not take as long. We really expect people to tear down and restart their admin node quite a number of times because that allows us to get much closer to simulating a production deployment. We don't want developers to have shortcuts for this. We want developers and test and production to be using the same basic install process every time. It exposes issues very, very quickly. So I'm going to go into these directories and I'm going to pull over some files. And I happen to have these files on my local network, so I can pull them over pretty quickly. See how I'm doing here. So I can just do that. I already have them at my internal network, and then let me grab the path. So my path on that machine, I'm storing these ISOs here, and I want to get these two ISOs. So I want to get this path. And just copy it. Since I'm in my cache directory, I want to copy that over. Yay, and that'll make things a little bit faster. And then I want to do the same thing with my Ubuntu disk. And I'll let that copy in the foreground. So the reason I don't actually need both disks, both ISOs, but it's very handy to have both ISOs. Oops, it doesn't matter. Transfer's not going because I didn't exchange keys with this server from here. It's really handy to have these systems running because, or both disks, because that allows me to choose to boot Ubuntu or Centos or whatever other ISOs you want. So this actually would not be necessary here. We're doing it because it's handy to start this running in the background so that we're not waiting on it to work from another system. This is one window into the system. I know a couple of windows going, which is pretty normal for me. So there's a transfer. Let's see what happened to that other transfer. Here we go. So let's kill 3311. Okay. And try this transfer again, but in the foreground. All right, much better. So we're going to get some nice local bandwidth. And get both these files moving. Alright, I didn't finish that. Oops. So we have our Ubuntu disk, our CentOS disk is a little bit bigger, so it's coming along. And now we're finished with positioning the boot assets. We're going to move into checking out some code, which is pretty darn good. Next, so let's go back into this window, and I've already got Git. That happened earlier. Let's clone my Crowbar code. Yay! And this is going to bring out the full Crowbar core, everything. And there's some good instructions about how to set up personal repos and things like that. You definitely want to do that. I'm not going to follow all those instructions because it's not necessary to do this at this time. You can come back and add your personal clone later, but it is necessary before you do a pull request. So this is moving along, and while I'm cloning code and copying disks, I can do yet a third thing, which is actually start my Docker install steps. So we have quite a bit of Docker install. And one of the things that I'm going to recommend you do, and we don't try to maintain because it moves too fast, is the Docker installation steps. And make sure that you pick the appropriate install. So this is the Docker dependencies for all these things. There is a script down in here that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So I have had mixed luck with this, but we can give it a try. See if Lady Luck shines on us today. Trick here is that the things that we're doing in parallel are, there's only one actual install. So the Docker we're installing, the assets we're downloading, and the code we're cloning. So there is no actual conflict between these three different activities. And then most of the rest of our activity, most of the rest of bringing up the environment is going to be done out of this this environment. So let's see if we can get all the way through here. It'll take a little bit of time. Centos still has a little ways to go, but our code is cloned, so we can jump over here. Whoops. I wasn't supposed to clone it into this directory. Hold on a second. And I'll just move it core to silly rabbit. And it looks like I have my CentOS disk go in there. Oh, okay, it's doing that temporarily. It'll be gone in a little bit. This is all my wget test Googles, by the way. I can remove those pretty handily. Yay. So now if I go into the core directory, yay, this is Crowbar. You'll notice that we actually bring in the docs. Everything here is what you want. And if I was just trying to run it directly on the system, and I was running it out of CentOS, I could clone it and run .production, and it would actually set up the scripts and do all those things. We want to actually use the Docker tools, and so we're gonna have to get Docker set up first, which is not. And so we've got a little ways to go on both of these things. I'm gonna pause, come back when we're ready. Alright, so where do we stand? I've got all the files and transfers done out of this page, so this transfer is set. It looks like I transferred to the wrong place. Easy enough to fix. But one thing, I just got them backwards. Alright, so let's move our CentOS ISO to our .cache. Crowbar. Reboot ISOs. Nope. Yep, that's it. So Crowbar will actually convert these ISOs into Kickstart or precedes or whatever is necessary as part of our provisioning process. So let me go back and see where we are in the instructions. Slide this over to make it easier to grab my windows. And okay, so we need to do just a little bit of cleanup. So here's this hit Docker. Yes, shouldn't work. I have to do sudo. Excellent. I don't want that to be the case, so I'm going to add myself to that group so I can do it. And then I'm lazy. I don't want to have to do a reboot yet. So I'm going to also give myself permission here. And now I have temporary permission from changing the permissions on the socket, and then I have I've added Crowbar to the group. Crowbar is my local user. Once again, all nice and happily documented. And then I do want to actually change the file type. We had some trouble. This might have been fixed. I still recommend making a change. So we're going to change the Docker default here. Not going to let myself resolve the DNS. But what we do want is to use the device mapper file system. And then I could, it's probably not a bad idea, to set my proxy, not to, this is CNTLM default, but I actually want to do is I'm going to use my Squid proxy and see if I can get some benefits from caching. And it's good. I'm in Ubuntu, so skipping these other operating systems. And then this is going to take some time. So before, sorry, I made the changes, so I need to restart the service. Good. And then I'm going to pull my files. So this is going to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to do it in a different window where I haven't changed the permissions yet. So if you get permission denied out of Docker, you can throw sudo in front of it. That'll be temporary until I've rebooted. And so what you see happened here is we've set up some Docker containers that have all the prereqs set up, which makes it faster to reinstall things. So you got to download them. And it's going to go through and pull those layers out of the system. And that's exactly what it's doing. And then once that's complete, then I can go in here. And if you're going to plan to do development, then doing your notes here is a good thing. So now we're stuck, waiting for this next step to complete. It's looking pretty good. Yep. So once the containers are set, then I can take the next step and actually launch the Crowbar admin. All right, we're back, and the Docker downloads are complete. Everything looks good. So now from my core directory, I should be able to actually do the run. So alright, so took a little pause for the install. So we've completed all these steps. We've got Docker installed. We've gone through, positioned our ISOs, and we are now at the point where we're going to run our production mode test. So for that, I'm just going to run our Docker admin and tell it we're going to use CentOS. I'm running the production script. This is exactly the same script that I would run if I was building a CentOS system itself, and I'm going to provide a FQDN name for the server to start with. And you'll notice the first thing we did is we started a tmux session, so that means that I can now move back and forth. I don't take over the whole screen, which is handy. And it's telling me very correctly that I've already done this, which is fine. So this plane is dead because I'm already running it here. I'm going to close that and start over. So this happens all the time. We only allocate one port. We only expect you to run one admin Docker node at a time. I'm hitting Control B X to exit the tmux pane. And I can turn off tmux, which I'm going to do by saying tmux equals false. And I'm going to look at my Docker processes. I already tested this machine, so when I exited out of that other container, it cleared out my Docker processes. And now I can restart this. It's going to tell me the important thing that it's mounting my home directory into OpenCrowbar. So that means if I bring other workloads like the hardware workload or OpenStack or Hadoop or Chef Metal or one of these other workloads we've got going, Ceph, then that's going to automatically map over. So anything I check out from GitHub will show up in my Docker container. This is going to take a little while to run. Let me make a copy of this. So I have another session going. And the thing I want to show you in this session, well, it struggles to log in. My machine's getting a little bogged down. Let's change the settings. Just like we had done before. Nice dark background. Alright, so it's going to spend some time doing this. If this is your first time building this Docker admin node, it's going to download a lot of materials. It's going to download Sledgehammer. It's going to take a bit of time. So this one step can occupy an hour easily if it's the first time doing it. Now the second time we cache all this stuff, so the second time it's much faster. and so it's going to continue to run quickly in the second mode. But the first time, there's a lot of stuff we have to drag down. And what I can do is I can look at my bridge controls, bridge BRCTO, and what this will show you is I don't have the bridge utils. I need that, which is tells me, and I'm going to install that also. Once again, this is in the docs. You'll actually see this if you read through what's going on. It'll tell you that here's your bridge utils. Here's the details of what we're going through right now, and this is just bringing up the Docker admin. And I'm doing some things in parallel because I'm used to doing it. You might not want to try and do quite as much in parallel. And so if I do the bridge show, you're going to see I have a Docker bridge and I have the interface for my container in it. And to actually be able to boot VMs against this or boot a physical machine, I have to add an interface. So I need to add interface Docker 0. Remember we set up this VM with multiple interfaces. E2 was my unbound interface. So if I look at it here, it's going to say it's down. It's now tell you Docker 0, which it wouldn't before. There's no IP address set for it. And then what I have to do is I have to turn that link on. So I'm going to IP link set E2 to up. And in that case, you now see I'm on Docker 0 and I'm up. And if I look at my bridge control, you'll see the Docker 0 bridge has E2. And that lets me look at this and see how it's doing. So it's just going through the normal process. We don't pre-cache things in the Docker container. We do stage some things in Docker, but we use the install script to install. And so we always use the production install script, even in development mode. It eliminates a lot of problems and errors. So it's going through and doing its thing. I will show you in our VirtualBox. So what I have here is I have some slave nodes, and the way they're configured is that their network, their network here, when I finish, is attached to the host, the Ethernet adapter host only network 2. What that means is when this VM boots, it is going to automatically boot against that network that I have the bridge on. So it will, once this is finished installing and had gone through all its annealing, when this boots, the Crowbar Pixie server will handle and capture this these slave nodes. The other thing I can do, I can't do it right now because obviously Crowbar's not done being installed, but in the tools directory, what you'll notice is I have this Docker slaves, Docker slave and Docker slaves. Docker slaves, if I call that, when the system's working, is going to automatically create more containers, by default Ubuntu containers, and attach them back to the Crowbar admin server. It's a great way, if you don't have a lot of RAM, to bring up a pretty big system and start doing dev testing, because the containers act a lot like VMs, but they don't take any boot time, they don't have to be discovered by Sledgehammer, they don't have to have you install an OS. So even on a very fast system, booting a VM, having it discovered, installing an OS on it, it's going to be 10 minutes at best. 20, 30 minutes on my laptop where it takes some time. I have less RAM. So the Docker containers can be up and ready in a minute, and so it's a much faster cycle time. I highly recommend experimenting with that as a way to do it. Start with a small number of slaves. You do have to close the slaves by hand right now, and so starting with 3 or 4 slaves will make you much happier than starting with 20 slaves. And this is actually the end of the demo. I'll run all this. I'm gonna pause, and then I'll jump back in when we've gotten to the interesting part. Oh, and I should note, this Crowbar bootstrap step takes a long time. So don't panic if you are at Crowbar bootstrap for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It's doing a lot. It's installing Chef, and there's a lot hidden in this one step. So it's okay. It'll take time. This will take time even after you've downloaded everything. So I'll check back in a couple minutes. So at this point, we've gone all the way through the install and basically completed all of the prerequisites, and we're actually doing the Crowbar install itself. This is the migration, and we're going to complete this and build the background workers and the website, and then hit the API to start annealing. So at this point, or just shortly after this point, I can hit the Crowbar web server, which we set up here. Mine is .6. You're just going to do whatever IP address you gave it. Shouldn't work yet. So we need to wait until the actual install is finished. It's getting close. Alright, so at this point, I was fixing up some of this documentation. Finish that. And so what you'll see here is in the screen we went through, started the web server, started the worker processes, actually called the API to build the admin node and turned it on, and then waited for it to converge. Once you see this, I'm waiting to converge, this might error out, it doesn't matter. It's just basically pulling the UI until it says that it's done converging. Default is Crowbar, happy day, and in this case it's actually doing the work of annealing. So I can go into the system view and watch it build up the system I'm trying to do. I can look at the annealer, see what's going on right now, and then see what work is still pending, and start navigating the site and playing around. Do not boot nodes until the admin node has reached ready state. Unlike Crowbar 1, where we did all this work and then gave you the UI, we actually use Crowbar to build Crowbar. And so all of these operational steps are being done by the annealer, and you can't boot other nodes until they've completed. Some of them are pretty slow the first time, so the Chef server is going to take a little bit of time, and building the OS repo cache on your first time through the system will take a while, because it's actually converting those ISOs that you staged in the TFTP boot area into pre-seeds and jump starts. So be patient on this step for the first time through. I promise the second time through it will be much faster, because we cache those outside of the Docker container and reuse them. So it'll be faster, but you've just got to go through these steps and let it build up effectively. This is building an operational data center environment with DNS, DHCP, NTP, PXE boot, DHCP, Chef server infrastructure. Basically everything you need to run a data center is getting set up right now by Crowbar automatically for you. You are welcome, of course, to click around and play things. This will let you see the logs of what Crowbar's installed. And you can even look at the data that it's been building up. So in this case, this is the system configuration that we defaulted to. And then here's information we pulled back as a result of completing this run, which is pretty cool. So there's a whole bunch of data to take a look at, and you should even be able to look at the machine itself and see the data that we've collected from that. So this is a virtual container, so it's going to have virtual containery stuff. This video has been going almost an hour, so we're going to wrap it up and continue on with point demos later. Hopefully this has been successful and you have gotten your Crowbar deployment system working. If not, please reach out to us on our Google group Crowbar list and ask for help. We definitely try to maintain this and keep these parts running, but there are a lot of moving parts, and you might find something that we overlooked. We want to hear from you. Thanks. All right. Good. You are set.